Britain. While much of her writing is about women or on women's issues, such as the perils of a secluded and cloistered life, women's reproductive health, the need for birth control, the toll that early marriage and frequent pregnancies take on their well being. Now, all these subjects had been beyond the pale of Urdu literature. Nobody talked about pregnancies and early marriages and all the rest of it. Being a doctor, she talks about it with a great deal of naturalness, with ease. But she's also talking about other pressing social issues: colonization, exploitation, democracy, nationalism, poverty, racial and religious prejudice. The sort of writing for women being done by male writers. Remember, she's among the early women writers writing in Urdu. There have been writings about women, but they have been writings by men so far. So she is actually using a speech in an idiom which has not been heard of before, a speech in an idiom which later American academics have called Begmati Zaban. The Begmati Zaban that is picked up by Ismat Chughtai and turned into a very sharp literary device is being used in a very natural way. Again, I don't have time to go into details, but there's a very interesting word coined by Antonio Gramsci, organic intellectual. I see Rashid Jahan as an organic intellectual. She picks on the socialism that is around her. Her parents, she's seen her parents make no difference between family retainers and the rest of the family. She is born to a father who has no baggage of class and caste. She comes to young adulthood in a home which is very egalitarian, very democratic. People make their own beds, do their own chores, all the rest of it. So the socialism, the Marxism that she has seen instinctively around her, the kind of people who have come to her home. Again, I don't have time to go into those early influences, but she picks on all of these things, and when she joins the party, it acquires a more sort of sharper political hue. So she was spot on in her depiction of scenes from women's life and demonstrated remarkable empathy for women who lived less than empowered lives. And she met many of those in the course of her practice. Being a doctor, she had easy access into the zanana, so the cloistered home that nobody really had entry into. She had entry into that. She also had a kind of a window into lives which normally women would not have, and that is reflected in her stories. One story, and I must beg your indulgence and talk a little about this. There's a story called Wo, which is an encounter between a young woman who we later find out works in a school and a prostitute. And this encounter takes place in a public dispensary. A story like Wo could not have been written by anybody except Dr. Rashid Jahan, because nobody except Rashid Jahan had access to this kind of material. This raw material was new. It was new in a way that it just wasn't there. Public dispensaries were not there. So those spaces were not there. And encounters such as between a girl from a Sharif family working as a teacher in a girls' school and a prostitute could not have been possible. And it trusts Rashid Jahan to pick up this encounter and turn it into a story. I don't have the time to go into her merits as a craftsperson. Of course, Ismat, who comes later, has the benefit of being a full-time writer. So there's greater, as it were, strength in her writing. Rashid Jahan is a writer on the go. She's running adult literacy classes. She's going to Harijan Bastis and doing things there. She's leading protest marches. Even when she's very ill, she takes part in a morcha. She's sent to Lucknow jail. So she's a woman who's doing many, many things. She's writing radio plays. At a time when radio has enormous reach, she's writing for the radio. She's a founder member of the Progressive Writers Association. She's a founder member of the IPTA. She has written many, many plays. A great deal of what she wrote has not been found. I'm so conscious of you looking at me, so I'm going to wrap this up with allow me to read one sher which makes sense here. मैं अकेला ही चला था जानिबे मंजिल मगर लोग आते गए और कारवां बनता गया. शुक्रिया.
I don't need this. So, but then this light goes off. It's okay. 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 I just want to. I know. I'm sorry, first of all, for eating into your time. It's because I was meant to come in the morning, but being a lawyer, my time is not under my own control. It's the court's control. So I'm so sorry. My apologies. I'll cut short my own time. I'll try to by simply going into certain names and pointing to the under-researched aspect. The first is Atiya Begum, not to be confused with Atiya Hussain or Atiya Faizi. Atiya Begum was the sister of the Begum of Janjira. And she was, now she organized the Faizi, She organized the Khadi exhibition in 1920 and 21, which was much praised by Mahatma Gandhi. And I'll just point out that she was also one of the founders of the Rashtriya Stri Sabha, which is another rather under-researched organization, because later on other organizations came up, and the Rashtriya Stri Sabha, which had been founded by a group of Parsi women and people like Atiya Begum, faded away. But it was very active in the 1921 non-cooperation movement in those days. So that's one. And I hope some researchers will take up the history of the Rashtriya Stri Sabha, because till the 1930 movement, you have a lot of references to it. Then, and of course, related to the Rashtriya Stri Sabha are the Parsi women in a very big way, the Nauroji sisters and so on. Then, may I just mention Sophia Somji. I don't know how Sophia Somji, because Sophia Somji is a much forgotten figure, doesn't figure in the literature, in the current literature at all. But I will read out a passage from a book published in 1949. It is about the 1930 movement, and Sophia Somji is addressing a meeting at Azad Maidan in Bombay. This is about that. One picture out of this is a work by G. Venkatachalam. One picture out of these stands out vividly and clearly before my mind's eye, and that is of Sophia Somji, the young feminist. Placed the Azad Maidan in Bombay, time towards evening, the sun still burning bright with noonday fierceness, a sea of surging humanity controlled by the officers of the law. A sudden outburst of cheers, and from amidst the colored crowd rises a saffron vision of a beautiful girl of 16 summers, 16 years old in 1930. Noble, refined, delicate, dark-eyed, golden, there's a long description. And then her speech, Bhayo Bheno, and how it gripped everybody. The spell breaks, the authorities demand the flag from her possession and order the crowd to disperse. The young suffragette sticks to her place and refuses to surrender the flag. A tussle follows in which she is overwhelmed by numbers and from sheer exhaustion gives in and is arrested. The court is crowded, and the magistrate is visibly moved by the charming prisoner before him, but soon pulls himself up and lets the law take its own course. The accused receives her sentence unmoved, and the word shabash, shabash is on everybody's lips. Sophia became a national heroine and a household word in 1930. She was the youngest of the dictators of the, in those, everybody who studied those movements knows that there were dictators appointed one after the other, and they had the right to appoint a successor. She was the youngest of all the dictators of the 1930 movement. Her subsequent life is very, very, very under-researched. She married into the family of Dr. Khan Sahib and Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. She was a Khoja, she had a Khoja background, and she then went off in 47 to NWFP, but came back to in the late 50s or early 60s to Bombay, where she died in 1961. You get another account of hers in Usha. There's an article by Usha Mehta in one compilation published by NBT, and there is a reference to her, but there is very little on her otherwise. She was married in 1935, and there is material on her marriage, which was, but for shortage of time, I'll cut that out. When I come to Bibi Amtul Salam, who is better known, of course, and her work in Noakhali is well known, so I won't go into that much. I want to point to another thing. There's a letter from Mahatma Gandhi sending her to Sindh in 1940. Now that's very interesting because Sindh in 1940 was a very disturbed area, and Allah Bakhsh was murdered in 1943, and the whole thing was linked to the Hur uprising and so on. But there is this letter which Gandhiji writes to Abdullah Harun Rashid, and he says, Behen Amtul Salam has been with me for the last 10 days. She came to me of her own free will. She is 36, that is, she was born in 1904. She is the daughter of the late Colonel Abdul Majid Khan Sahib Mir Munshi of Patiala. From her childhood, she has been devoted to the cause of Hindu-Muslim unity. The murders that are taking place in Sindh are worrying me, no doubt, but Amtul Salam also is worried. I am therefore sending her to you on the strength of our relations during the Khilafat movement. I think you can play a big role in stopping these murders. I am not thinking at the moment of the political aspect. It is a question of humanity. Behen Amtul Salam does not know anything of politics and is not interested in it. She is a staunch Muslim. She is never irregular in reading the Quran. When she is not ill, she observes the Ramzan strictly. She has been silently serving a good many Muslims. She is brave. She intends to lay down her life if these murders are not stopped. And I have fully encouraged her to do so. I hope that you will not misunderstand her or me in this connection. I do not have with me a stauncher or nobler man or woman than she. And when she wishes to sacrifice her life to save the honor of Islam and serve the Hindus, I consider it my duty to give her my blessings. So this is, I won't go into her Noakhali work, but just remind you that there is a comment by Gandhi saying that, I would have been very ineffective in Noakhali if you had not been there with me. And there is a place called Borkomta in East Bengal, about which Gandhi writes to her in 1948, January. This is just before the assassination. I hold that it is your duty to go to Borkomta. No other question arises if you two believe the same. It is imperative that you go to Borkomta soon. In my view, you are the moving spirit behind whatever has been achieved there. It was and still is your most significant work. So this is Amtul Salam. And then I'll cut out the other material. Just mention Kulsum Sayani. Kulsum Sayani, is another figure, very major figure in our history. Her work is on language, essentially. She was interested in the Hindustani movement. But her work is multifaceted. And someone really needs to do a biography. Her papers are at the Nehru Memorial Museum, and it's something waiting to be done. When partition took place and the question arose of what would happen to Urdu and Hindi, there is a letter, a very moving letter from Gandhi to Kulsum. She died quite late, in 1987. She was with us till 1987. Surprising that nobody really took the trouble to. Now let me come to Amina. The Tyabji's summon is here, and I've ascertained from her that she's not going to be speaking on some of the people I'll mention. So let me first of all mention Abbas Tyabji's wife, Amina Tyabji. The letter, I don't know if she was mentioned earlier in the day, the letter to the Viceroy in 19... Sorry?
Tyabji here.
Oh, well, she will take care of it. So anyway, the letter to the Viceroy in 1930 on behalf of the women of India is, of course, signed by Amina Tyabji. And Amina Tyabji was, when a meeting was held in Dundee, conference of women emerged on the spot. And there is this letter, special note by Gandhi, where he says that this conference of women of Gujarat assembled at Dundee on 13th April 1930, and so on. So the conference appoints the following executive committee. Mrs. Tyabji is the president. Mituben Patel Petit is the vice president. And of course, Amina Tyabji's contribution is huge. They moved the story of Southwood. I don't know if it was repeated here, but they moved in the 30s, Abbas Tyabji and Amina, to Mussoorie. And Sharifa, but Abbas Tyabji also moved to Mussoorie, and he died there in June 1936. When we went there, the house was bought, and it was actually, it went on to Sharifa and Hamid Ali, who later, 48, wanted to give it to the, who wanted to give it to the President of India, and Rajan Babu was president. He said, please keep a life interest. And then we found, when we went there in 1996, that in fact, the house had been denuded. Of course, the couple had died. Sharifa and Hamid Ali had died. And the house had been denuded of all its furniture and everything, and was waiting to be demolished. I think we managed to...
Denuded of everything.
Yes. So, but we did manage to halt the demolition, the proposed demolition, but I'm afraid we could not. We did find a painting there of Amina in a khadi sari and Abbas Tyabji with a Gandhi cap, and which was lying on the floor. And we tried to protect it. I don't know what has happened now. Then I may just mention this. I don't want to read out this draft letter to the Viceroy, which was sent under Amina Tyabji's name in 1930, because that will take up some time. But since we have come to Sharifa, I will just mention that Hamid Ali was, Sharifa was Abbas Tyabji's eldest daughter, and Hamid Ali was posted as collector to Satara for 4 years in Maharashtra. And in Maharashtra, there was a major figure called Bhaurao Patil, who had been setting up hostels and schools for Dalits with the help of the Kolhapur family and so on. And he was one of those who didn't enter into this Gandhi versus Ambedkar thing. He had good relations with all. And Hamid Ali, Mrs. Hamid Ali, that is Sharifa, visited him in the 40s when they were posted there. And there is this record of this meeting, which I'll just read out to you. Jijamata Adhyapika Vidyalaya Satara. This was the second and the only training institution in the series of primary training colleges started by Bhaurao Patil in 1942 for women teachers. The credit for persuading, or rather compelling Bhaurao to start this women's training college at Satara goes to Mrs. Sharifa Hamid Ali. In 1941, she came all the way from Mussoorie, that is from Uttarakhand now, to Satara to see Bhaurao and his institutions. While going round the institutions, she came to the Silver Jubilee Rural Training College. She was sorry that there was no school for women. She gave a loving threat to Bhaurao Patil. You men are all selfish. Why do not you do anything for women's education? If you do not move in this matter, mind you, brother, I will not see your face. She entered a remark to this effect in the visitor's book of the Sanstha. So this is in writing. In the same vein, he also resolved in front of her and promised her to start a training institution for women from June 42. He started this college on Monday, the 15th of June 42, and when he reported to Sharifa the fact of starting of a training college for women, she immediately sent from Masuri a donation of rupees 500. So that is one. There's just one other letter I thought I would read out to you because it's too good to miss. You know, there is a story about Hamida. I'm not going to go into details. Hamida was that daughter of the Tyabji family who married a Hindu. Now, there was, when this whole business was being discussed, in the course of that, Abbas Tyabji unfortunately passed away in 1936. And then there is this letter which Gandhi writes to Amina Tyabji in November 1937. He says, "My dear sister, I have purposely refrained from writing to you up till now because I wanted to have a chat with Maulana Sahib," that's Maulana Azad, "before writing to you." He wanted to discuss with Maulana the possibility of this interreligious marriage. Merely sending you an acknowledgement I held to be unnecessary. I had a long chat with the Maulana. So far as I could see, he agrees with my reading of the Quran, apart from traditional and sectarian interpretations. But as he may be the only divine in India to give the liberal and universal interpretation to the Quran, he does not want to come out as a radical reformer and thus impair his influence among the Indian Muslim world. He has therefore himself written to Habib, that is Professor Habib, Irfan Habib's father, to come to Muhammad Habib. To come to Calcutta with Sohaila whilst I am here. I have therefore telegraphed to Habib to come here. Please believe me when I tell you that I have been always thinking of you, your difficulties and your sorrows ever since the Hamida affair has cropped up. I have acted, will act, and I'm still acting as if the living image of Abbas Sahib was in front of me as witness of all I am doing. More than that, I could not do. So this is, and of course you may want to know the culmination of this affair. There was an article in, this is a picture of Hamida with the charkha, flying the charkha, And this article appeared in the Bombay magazine in 1990. Yeah, this article appeared in the Bombay magazine in 1990. And there's an interview, by this time Hamida had passed away, but Prabodh was alive. So there is this interview with Prabodh where he says that, ultimately Gandhiji was able to persuade the Tyabji family in favor of this interreligious marriage, which he says was held in London, because the law in India required that if you had an interreligious marriage, you had to disavow your own faith, whereas in London the law didn't require that. So they married in London, and that was the solution. So there's this interview with Prabodh. I think that's all for now. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anil Nauriya. He referred to many lesser-known eminent women. He referred to Amtul Islam. You see, very interesting anecdote related to Amtul Islam. She stayed with the Gandhiji at Sabarmati Ashram. The title Qaid-e-Azam was given to Jinnah by Gandhiji. It is commonly, people think so, and it is commonly known. But it was Gandhiji in one of letter, he wrote that he was writing back to Jinnah Then the Ummatul Islam suggested that the Urdu newspaper, they use this term for jinnah, so please use this word. So it was the Ummatul Islam that you referred to, and he also referred to Sophia Somji. She was married to the younger brother of Sarhadi Gandhi, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, and many important points he made. So these are some interesting part. Then the Amna Qureshi was also, and Amna Qureshi was also one of the disciple of Gandhi ji. She also stayed at Sabarmati. So thank you very much for your excellent presentation. Now I request eminent bureaucrat and writer Wajahat Habibullah Sahab for his presentation.
Thank you very much. But I don't know if I can really make your presentation because I think you've run out of time. No, this whole session has been so enriching for me because my own, the members people mentioned have had so much to do with my own family. Placing my family in this context, and particularly in what Laila had to say. My family, of course, has several representatives already on the board. There's my aunt Atiya Hussain, about whom I'd asked Rakhshanda to say a little more, because my cousin Shama, who lives in Bombay, had specially requested that I not speak of her, but Rakhshanda do, because Rakhshanda is a writer, and it could probably be more inspired. But there's much written about her on in the exhibition, and about my mother. But of course, there's such a strong linkage between all these ladies. Now, Laila had, of course, mentioned her mother and Surya Tyabji and the great contribution that she had made. But I'll just let you have a little aside, and that is that they were both co-students at the Mehboobiya College, Mehboobiya School in Hyderabad. And this was also mentioned a little earlier by Begum Sahaba from Hyderabad, who is also Mehboobiya. So I think that here we can also see the role of Mehboobiya in producing. Mehboobiya was not, of course, not a women's college, but it was a school for Hyderabadi girls of leading families. And the contribution that the girls from Mehboobiya has made is all very explicit in your exhibition, because my mother was from Mehboobiya, her mother was from Mehboobiya, Laila Ali Yawar Jung was from Mehboobiya, and Khadiva, as you heard, was one of the founders of Mehboobiya. So this particular school has obviously played a great role in the building of modern India, and I think that also deserves, since we're talking about recognition, that also deserves to be recognized. But particularly so far as Surya Tyabji is concerned, she was a very timid and diffident child, a very quiet child, and my mother was not. My mother was somewhat gregarious and also rather mischievous. She relates the story of how one of the tiresome, and she said with the encouragement of Nilamani Naidu, who was one of her teachers, her English teacher, she actually placed a poster on the seat of one of her teachers, so when the teacher got up, it got stuck to her backside, and it said, "I am a fool," or "I'm too fat," or something like that. So that was the kind of person that she was. But these were women who then went on to make their mark, and I won't go into the details, in fact, of what exactly they did, because much of it has been covered, and what my mother has done is there. But the point is that the other thing I'd like to mention would be the fact that I belong to a family that was sharply divided by what happened in partition. Kidwai Sahab mentioned Majda Banu. Majda Banu was fighting from the Congress, as he said, the Indian National Conference, Indian National Congress, strongly supported by my uncle Rafi Ahmed Kidwai. But may I tell you that the person who opposed her was in fact my grandmother, Inam Fatima, who was Inam Fatima Habibullah, who was from the Muslim League. And much has been spoken about the burqa, but my grandmother had come out of the burqa, had left the burqa, at the behest of no other than Qaid-e-Azam, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, to whose party she belonged. And Majda Banu was very much in parda. So the strategy, when the election was conducted, Rafi Ahmed Kidwai rang up my grandmother and said, Begum Sahab, aap to haar gayi. उन्होंने कहा कैसे कहते हो ये? Because he said that when the campaign was on, then you could only campaign in one place because you didn't have a burqa. Whereas there were 5 Majda Banos campaigning simultaneously. In Lucknow. And then Majda Banu never actually appeared in public, but therefore they were able to cash in on the propaganda that Begum Habibullah to Amir Khandan ki hai, wo aapke gharibon ke baare mein kya jaane, lekin Majda Banu to gharib Khandan ki hai. And the slogan that was used was Kale Kale Baal, Gore Gore Gal, Gharib Majda Banu ko vote do. But in this case, of course, it hadn't quite worked because my grandmother actually won. And but among her rivals, as when she was a senior leader of the Muslim League, was Begum Ezaz Rasool, who is one of the women featured here. And then Begum Ezaz Rasool went on to becoming one of the rivals of my mother, who had then joined the Congress. But that in itself tells you a story, because there was this deep cleavage within the family about what one felt about this new idea of Pakistan, which finally badly divided my family. Unlike the Tyabji family, which remains so united, my family got badly divided. But within my family, therefore, there was, as I mentioned, my grandmother, who had broken tradition, was the first Talukdari woman to actually come out of the parda, and my aunt, her daughter, who was also my mother-in-law, because she'd gone away to Pakistan, but she was the first woman president of the Lucknow Students' Union. And at that time, she was a Marxist. And among her cohorts was D.P. Dhar, Shankar Dayal Sharma, and a host of other people who later went on to considerable promise in politics. And the person, my grandfather, becoming quite alarmed at her communist propensities, had then engaged his grandfather, Maulana Abdul Majid, who had himself been a Marxist in his youth, to actually come and train her about the merits of being a good Muslim. So this is the family background. But here, so much has been mentioned. Rashida Jahan has been mentioned. She was another aunt of mine because she'd married an uncle of mine, Mahmood Zafar, who was a dedicated communist. And there is the Hajra Begum, who has been mentioned. Hajra Begum, again, an aunt was from the family, but then she remarried. Raja Pirpur was her husband earlier. She belonged to the aristocracy, to the Muslim aristocracy of Awadh, but Rampur really. But the point is that this also brings across the discussion that has so far taken place, has brought across the great political vibrance that was witnessed in the city of Lucknow. Lucknow was a sort of religious political capital, and that is where, in fact, the division of the country was actually decided, the partition of the country. Because we know the history of partition, we don't have to go into the grounding, but in that, on both sides, a great part was played by Muslim women, and therefore it is very necessary to remember now and nurture the memories of those Muslim women who then had very consciously, despite family pressures, despite political contradictions even within family, opted clearly to be part of India. This is very true of my mother. I mentioned, of course, the fact that my mother was Mehboobiya. She was brought up, educated. She was born in Lucknow. Her family was of Lucknow descent, Neotani descent, origin. That is why I'm related to Mr. Kidwai here, whose mother and my grandmother from my mother's side were sisters. But the Hyderabad influence obviously was very strong on her, because as she grew older, and as this choice became necessary, particularly in the army, because my father happened to be in the army, so the choice was to opt for India or Pakistan. And as you know, a very large section of the Muslim officers, the overwhelming majority of Muslim officers in the Indian Army actually opted to go to Pakistan. And there was a circular from the Home Ministry at that time that those Muslim officers in the Indian Army who wish to opt for Pakistan are welcome to do so, but those Muslim officers who wish to opt for India are welcome to opt for India, but they will no longer remain members of the Indian Army. Now, this was when this circular was issued. It obviously came to the notice of my father, and he and Brigadier Osman, who were at that time the senior most officers of the Indian Army, actually went to Jawaharlal Nehru and asked that notification be withdrawn. Not many people will know about this, but the major influence in doing that was that of my mother, who refused. She said she refused to actually go and live in Pakistan. And the point is that in her childhood, a mention was made in the earlier session this morning of a bonfire of English goods, which so angered the British resident in Hyderabad. She was one of those children who actually participated in the bonfire of those goods. And she reminded me, she left us now on March the 13th only of this year. The Almighty was kind enough to let her spend this would have been her 102nd birthday. So she was with us for 101 years. But in the last years, she would sit and often sing. That in our childhood, she would say, "This is the song that we were always made to sing. God save our gracious King." And she'd sing it, and she said, "Long to reign over us, long to reign over us," and just see what we are today. So this is the kind of person that she was. But, of course, as has been mentioned, she was not happy with the way that India was going. And particularly, and this is not something to do with this present government, she was particularly unhappy at what had become of the Urdu language. And she was instrumental in setting up the first of India's Urdu academies in Lucknow. And she was, of course, not happy in the way that it was run. But then, normally, those who set up institutions are never happy in the way that they're run afterwards. But she had led a life dedicated to the promotion of Urdu, but even more so to the education of Muslim girls. And this is a passion which she shared, despite the sharp political difference, with my grandmother, who set up the Talim Gah Nisma in Lucknow and was instrumental in setting up the Awadh Degree College, which afterwards was set up actually by my mother, but it was the foundations for which were laid by my grandmother, who insisted that the school that was there become the degree college for the Loreto convent over there. And it became the Loreto Degree College, then afterwards it became the Awadh Degree College, which was made by my mother. So these were the various elements that were there at the time that India became independent, who went on to actually contribute to what India has become. My mother's contribution there, apart from all these other things, was in fact the way my father was the founder commandant. And I'm so glad, Hamiza ji, that you put up the picture, the poster in the picture that you put up. You put up all the notable women in all those pictures. But in our case, you put up both my father and my mother, because they were very much part of each other. Because my father, as I mentioned, happened to have been the founder commandant of the National Defence Academy in Khadakwasla. He built that academy. The trees which he planted are the trees which now adorn that academy, because it's a completely barren area when he actually moved in. It had no trees at all, let alone the proliferation of trees which you find there. But she helped craft the cultural ambience of that academy. It was she who helped cultivate that cultural ambience, and that came from her background in Hyderabad. And that is why the auditorium there is still called the Habibullah Auditorium. And that in building that cultural ambience of a patriotic national stand of what India is, her hand was instrumental. And I say this particularly because all the time that she worked, she did not feel that she was working for Muslim women. Her opposition to the idea of partition was not the idea of being a Muslim and therefore wanting to be a part of India or Pakistan. It is simply recognizing the fact that she was Indian. And this is all the more remarkable because she was, not her birth, but certainly her education and training was all Hyderabad oriented. Brought up in Hyderabad, and she married before Hyderabad, actually before India's independence. She'd been brought up in a principality, which is technically not really a part of the Indian Dominion. It was a princely state in Hyderabad and the Nizam state, and that I think says a lot about the kind of woman that was produced in India at that time and nurtured not feelings of patriotism because you happen to be a Muslim, but nurtured patriotism, feelings of patriotism because of the love for India. And I think this is something that is shared by your mother and my mother, although they were brought up in what were princely states about which there was even a question in 1947 as to whether they were going to be part of India or not going to be part of India. But this was the feeling at that time. That is why the whole issue of partitioning this country along various lines was what I may call absolutely stupid. A stupid decision taken at a particular time. But now, looking back on it in present times, it is time to understand that those who were intelligent enough to realize that it was a stupid decision and had taken the right decision are also remembered and honored for the decision that they took, which has made the community and the community as part of India, but also the larger community of Indians much more enriched and much more vibrant than it would have been had it been deprived of a vibrant element of its own form, of its own existence, which is the component of the Muslim community, as of every other community. Its diversity is its richness, and to this diversity, the women that you have mentioned and will mention, hopefully, in your own quest for such persons who helped, such women who helped build India. When they are recognized, then it will be recognized as to what has been the contribution of this community in building what is now not the Indian Muslim community, but the Indian community. If I may again emphasize that, it is their contribution to the building of India that is important, not necessarily their contribution to the building of Muslims in India. That is only an element, that is only a part. I think that what they did, and the persons who have demonstrated, and certainly I can say this with pride about my own mother, that she did not really bring us up. In fact, I'm writing all this now, but when I was in school in the Doon school in Dehradun, I could not tell. Her brother was in school with me also. He was Anil Tyabji. Now I didn't realize that he would happen to be more like me and not less like others because he was a Muslim. The only time I realized that he was a Muslim was when we actually gathered together to go and say our prayers, to go for our namaz, or when we went to Urdu class, which of course he avoided. He didn't like going to Urdu class at all. And I went to Urdu class. Unfortunately, by then, the Urdu language had already begun to be identified. And that was the consequence of partition. It had come to be identified with the Muslims. And that is something, of course, that my mother always so fought against. And that is why she had campaigned to get that academy in Lucknow, particularly, because she considered Urdu the language of Lucknow. And since she had this both Hyderabadi and and Lakhnawi background, I think it's important from the point of view of recognizing Urdu, that she recognized Urdu as the language of Lucknow, and Telugu was the language of Hyderabad. so, so these all these points really go to show why it is important. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to dwell more on the various points that I'd noted down to share with you today. But these points I thought were something that I thought I must mention, because I think it's important, this new step that you have taken, particularly in present troubled times, to understand what is the background, what is the thesis which we may now seek to develop as an apotheosis of the tradition of the Indian woman, among which the Muslim woman also has a major pride of place. Thank you.
Excellent presentation.
1 minute, sir.
Okay.
I just wanted to add a little to what Wajahat said, because when he spoke of his father having to take this decision of going to Pakistan or to stay in India, the same thing obviously happened to my father, who was in the ICS, who never had a question in his mind, and nor did his wife or the extended family, that was India. But I think it's very important for all those people who keep telling us that, oh, Muslims, Pakistan was created for you, why don't you go off and live there? And say that if you decide to live here, you'd better just put up with whatever it is. That there were huge numbers of Indian Muslims who never thought for a minute of going to Pakistan, but who, like Wajahat's father or my father, were put under a lot of pressure. My father was an ICS officer. He also was more or less told that, come on, you've got a place. And it was shocking to him that some of his dearest colleagues in the service all put a lot of pressure on him to say, you'd better go off to Pakistan. And there were even some Hindu colleagues who wouldn't store their luggage when their house was attacked, because they didn't want to be threatened by the fact that this was a rather dangerous thing to be an Indian Muslim at that time. So I think it's important to remember and honor them for that.
Thank you very much for the excellent session. Before I end, I just mention the name of Sultana Hayat. Sultana Hayat was a very prolific writer, and I think her contribution should also be there. She was the wife of a very eminent journalist, Hayatullah Ansari. Hayatullah Ansari's novel लहू के फूल, इसका प्रीफेस बहुत, उसका जो इंतसाब है बहुत अच्छा, हासिल हयात सुल्ताना हयात के नाम. And Wajahat Habibullah Sahab referred to Lucknow time and again. So I just end with the anecdote, or you can say a pleasant note with, I refer to Azizan as a prostitute of Lucknow. Then another another singer of Lucknow, whose name was Dilruba. So I just end with that, because it is said that the Bazla Sanji, in English we say it is a wit or quip, is the forte of a male, but it is not. The Dilruba proved it otherwise. एक दफ़ा लखनऊ में इलेक्शन हुआ, तो लखनऊ में एक हकीम साहब थे, उनका नाम था हकीम शमसुद्दीन. वो इलेक्शन लड़ रहे थे, तो दिलरुबा भी खड़ी हुई इलेक्शन में. तो कैसे उन्होंने उनको, वो बहुत ही वेरी टॉकेटिव और बहुत ही ऐसे आदमी थे कि उनसे कोई ज़बान में और बातचीत में कोई उनसे जीत नहीं सकता था हकीम शमसुद्दीन से. तो उन्होंने जब इलेक्शन हुआ तो लखनऊ वालों ने दिलरुबा को भी खड़ा किया उनके मुकाबले म्यूनिसिपलिटी के इलेक्शन में. तो हकीम साहब शायर भी थे, तो उन्होंने एक मिसरा कहा. उसका मिसरा था, दीजिए दिल दिलरुबा को वोट शमसुद्दीन को. इलेक्शन हुआ और वो हकीम साहब जीत गए और वो हार गई. जब हार गई तो देखिए जो कैसे उन्होंने ओवरवेल्म किया और कैसे उनको दंदान शिकन जवाब दिया. दिलरुबा ने, ज़ाहिर है उस तरह की उनकी तालीम नहीं थी. हकीम साहब कहा जाता था उनसे कोई बातचीत में या बदला संजी में या विट में कोई जीत नहीं सकता था. वो उनके पास आई, इलेक्शन हो गया तो फिर आई. ये हकीम साहब थे, वो ज़ाहिर सिंगर थी, और उन्होंने आके कहा इनसे, हकीम साहब बैठे हुए थे अपने घर के बाहर, तो उन्होंने आके मुबारकबाद दी. कहा मैं आपको मुबारकबाद देती हूँ कि आप जीत गए और मैं हार गई. मगर इस इलेक्शन से एक बात साबित हो गई कि लखनऊ में मरीज़ ज़्यादा और मर्द कम हैं। तो ये उसका जवाब दिया उन्होंने। दीजिए दिल दिलरुबा कोट शमसुद्दीन को। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed been a stupendous session. Thank you so very much. And we'll quickly proceed to our next session, which is charting a way forward.
Just so that we get distracted for a moment.